Hello, hello, hello. My name is Jason Allen. I'm a realtor based in Palm Springs, California. And on a weekly basis, I like to do a market report. I focus each week on one of the four cities that I do most of my business in. There are actually 9 cities within the Coachella Valley. The four I tend to focus on are Palm Springs, Cathedral City, Rancho Mirage, and Palm Desert. This week, I'm going to look at Cathedral City. And before I dive into this, I just want to make a few remarks. First of all, about 6 months ago, my local association decided to change the reports that they published. They're not quite as graphic oriented as they used to be. And as a consequence, it afforded me the chance to step back and try and put myself in a consumer's place. So either a buyer or a seller. And sometimes this information just sort of washes over people. I get it. I'm in the weeds. You're not. You just want to buy a house. You just want to sell a house. So I've taken a stab at creating a chart that will hopefully better illustrate in a visual way what's going on right now. Before I get to that, I'm going to dive into the traditional charts that are available to me. These will look familiar to you. And let me bring that up on my screen. Once again, I'm focusing on Cathedral City, California. You can see here, this is for June of 2025. It's currently July 22nd, 2025. And in this case, I've chosen all single family homes, all condos. For those that don't know, we have two types of property here. One is fee simple, where you own the structure and the land underneath. And the other is a leased land situation where you only own the structure and you pay rent on the land the structure is on. In this case, I just put them all together. We can parse it in a specific case. If you're deciding to look at a leased land property or a fee simple land property, we can do that on a case-by-case basis. But for statistical purposes, this gives us enough properties for us to get a picture of what happened in the last month. All right, diving in, unit sales, 46. That's about 8% down from June of 2024. So our market has not fallen off a cliff. We have fewer sales, yes, but not significantly fewer. Median sales price, $496,500. We'll round it up to $500,000. And median, for those that don't remember, is the number right in the middle. So half of the 46 homes sold above this $500,000 mark, half sold below it. Why do we choose median versus average? Average is useful in some cases. Median is a consistent number across time. So if we look at this every month and we are tracking where the median lands on a graph, we have a better sense of it as opposed to an average where an outlier, something that's sold for a lot of money that's unusual or very little money, which is unusual, doesn't skew the numbers. Inventory is 263. We're up almost 20% over June of last year. Days on market, 76. That's up about 52%. So homes are staying on the market longer. Sales price to list price, 97.8. And this is an average. So on average, people are getting close to their asking price. But we're going to look at that in a different way later. And in this case, sales to original list price, this is when the consumer, the homeowner, has lowered their price more than once. So you can see in this case, they're getting less than, but not significantly less than what they asked on average, about 5% less. Sales above list price, 32.6%. Now, this is a snapshot of just June. When we look at the longer horizon, the last 6 months in a later chart, that's going to change. Month supply of inventory is 5.91. What does month supply mean? It simply means if we had no new inventory come to the market, it would take us about 6 months to sell every property that's available. I think this is misleading, and I'll show you why on the chart that I created. Median sales price, again, we look at all the properties that sold, $308 per square foot. That is up a little bit compared to June of last year. So prices are not falling off a cliff, according to this chart. And then lastly, sold within 30 days, 28% sold within 30 days, 43% sold within 60 days, and 70% sold within 90 days. Really helpful on a month-by-month basis. I decided to take a 6-month view. 6 months gives us more data, and it enables us to dive a little bit deeper. I'm going to introduce you to this screen. So Flex MLS is the service that my local association uses. I did a search whereby I took all closed listings in Cathedral City. And so this will be for both condos and houses. I looked at the 6 months of January 22nd to today's date, July 22nd, 2025. And then with this list, I'm able to export the data. And I did that and put that into a Google Sheet and came up with this. And if you'll notice, in this column is the original list price. In this column is the close price. This column is the difference or the delta between the two. And then here I flagged whether it was over asking, at asking, or under asking. Very quickly, as I scroll down this column, you're going to get the sense, accurately so, that the vast majority of the properties that sold in Cathedral City sold under asking. There are a few things that we have to take into consideration. Properties sell based on three things: their location, their condition, and market demand. And market demand will govern what the asking price is and what the selling price is. What do I mean by that? If you go down this list and you see all these prices, these original list prices, and you see the close price, original list price tend to be done based on what has sold recently in a given market for a given type of property: single-family dwelling, condo, fee simple, lease land. And then evaluated based on its location and its condition. Is it in good, better, or worse condition than a similar house that sold very nearby? You get the idea. And there's a science to this, but there's also a bit of artistry. And someone who's been doing this work a long time has a better ability to dial in what that initial asking price is. Now, in some cases, sellers decide that they want XYZ for their property, and an agent willing to take that listing at that number brings it on, and it never sells, or it doesn't sell for a long time and you end up taking several price reductions. Or together you decide, look, the market seems to be showing us that most properties are selling under the asking price. Let's actually try and come in under what we think it should be so that we attract enough interest that more than one person comes along and makes an offer. And that's most likely what's happened in these cases where you have over asking numbers. You know, you listed at 631,340 and it sold for 671,85. My experience tells me there were more than one buyer interested in that property to push it over up to almost $40,000 over the asking price. You have others where it's 3,000, 15,000, 13,000, 10,000. Clearly there are buyers in the marketplace that are willing to pay what a property is worth. At asking suggests to me that they nailed the number, right? They introduced the property at the right number and there was a buyer or buyers willing to pay that. Under asking tells me there's probably one buyer that came along, maybe two, but most likely one. And they were able to negotiate something less than the asking price. And some of these are dramatic: 25,000, 25,000, 15, 34,000. These are significant numbers. In this case, $100,000 under the asking price. Now, one can argue that the asking price was incorrect based on its condition and location, or one could argue that for that particular type of property in that location, in that condition, there was very little buyer demand. And when you see numbers like that, it tells me the seller needed to sell. Death in the family, inherited property, job relocation, loss of job, pending foreclosure. Various reasons will motivate someone to take that sort of offer. And why it's important when you go to make an offer, we look at the information objectively. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom because there's two more things I want to show you. The first is 10% of the properties went over asking. over the last 6 months. 15% sold at asking, and a whopping 75% sold under asking. When we go out over to this chart and we see that 32.6% sold over asking, that is in this particular month of June of 25. So this last June, of the 46 that sold, 32% were over asking. But if we look at a longer arc, we see that that's not the trend. Visually, this chart to me is important, and I'm going to enlarge it just so the little dots get a little bit bigger. But what you can see here is the red line is the asking price. All the little blue triangles are where properties sold. You do see many on the red line, some you see over, and many you see under. And some are dramatically under. My hope is that this is useful information and that I've simplified it somewhat and created a visual representation of what's happening in the market. Do I think it's a good time to buy? 100%. Do I think there's chaos in the world? 100%. What we saw during COVID were people sort of going berserk trying to get a property and doing so with very low interest rates. And now we kind of have the opposite effect. People are pulling all back, not wanting to make a purchase unless they absolutely have to, because interest rates are a little bit higher. Interest rates may or may not come down. My guess is that if they come down a point, you're going to see a number of people coming back into the market. What's a point? Going from 7% to 6% or 6.75 to 5.75. You will see a number of people come back into the market. And if you are a buyer, that means you now have more competition. We'll see the overall inventory shrink, and the best properties will go quickly at or over asking. My recommendation is that if you're on the fence, if you're waffling at all, speak to me, speak to your local agent. There are more opportunities for buyers to do things that they couldn't do when it was, quote unquote, a seller's market. I'll give you an example. You live in Seattle and you want to sell your home, but you don't want to sell your home first. You want to find a house first. So in this market, you could probably find a house, make an offer with it contingent upon the sale of your house in Seattle. That's a lot of leeway for you as the buyer. You may be paying the asking price, and as long as it's a fair asking price, it's worth it to you to not have to sell your house, be homeless until you find a house that you want to buy. These are the types of conversations a professional can help you with. I'm available. I offer a 1-hour consultation at no charge. I do it by Zoom. And we basically ferret out whether or not I'm a good fit for you, you're a good fit for me, and I can actually help you in this market. That's all I've got. Thanks for sticking with me. If you have any questions, as I said, reach out. Until next time, take care.